welcome to Heart Snuggles. We're so happy you're here today. And I brought a special guest from Australia. So go ahead and introduce yourself.
Oh, g'day, Lexi. Hello to everyone tuning in from around the world. I'd like to say g'day, neighbour. I'm Chef Jason Roberts. You! Currently in lockdown, slightly nuts.
So tell us how you became a chef.
I guess ultimately, I think we all have a calling in life, Lexi, and for anyone who's listening, that you sort of have to listen to that and go with gut instinct. But I was very fortunate to have grandparents on both sides of my family who dabbled in food. On my mother's side, my grandparents ran the catering at a girls' school in the South Island of New Zealand. And my grandparents, or particularly my grandmother on my father's side, she ran a small cafe also in the South Island of New Zealand. So I think fundamentally, I remember that there's joy and this happiness of big burly women and people in white coats and restaurants. And when you're I was extremely cute as a baby. When you're being trotted around these kitchens and the other chefs who are women as well, and they see you and they dote over you and they give you a biscuit out of the jar, and I love that energy. I want to do what all that is. I want to be this but older, but I'm going to do that. And then I work out you get paid to do that. So ultimately, my love of food started at 4 years old because of that connection to my own grandmother. And I think anytime there was an opportunity, whether it be through school or obviously then, a culinary program when I left school, and then I did what I could. But ultimately, when I got into the trade, I started cooking, and my career has evolved and grown and shape shifted. And obviously because of COVID, I hate the word pivot, but we pivoted, and hence, I'm doing a lot of pottery as well. But, I think I was always designed to get into an industry where I was going to serve. And, I have a lot of conversation at the moment based around men's mental health and domestic violence, because I grew up with a lot of these things. And not to digress, but more importantly, it probably will shape who I am today. But the idea of food and real connection, I love the sentiment of it's not what's on the table, it's who's in the seat. So food's been important to me. But where I am today, it's about the conversation that's derived from sitting around the table. That's not to say that my food's not delicious and don't appreciate and enjoy it. It's just that I'm here because I believe in people, and I love the idea of sharing conversation.
So beautiful. I love that. Big journey for you, and it's so cute how you related it back to being that little kid and receiving all that love and that good food, and you wanting to amplify that and keep that.
I think it's, Alexa, I think it's one of the things that we really struggle with to date is identifying who that little child is that we left along the way. And if you're dealing with anything, and I don't know how big this, as far as your podcast and how deep you get with conversation, but if anyone who's dealing with addiction, anyone dealing with repetitive, trauma or anything along in their life, you have to look back at what point did I let go of that little kid? At what point did the whimsical leave that child, and how can I find that again? And it has a lot to do with obviously a lot to do with self-love. Shit, this took a turn quickly from food to self-love, but ultimately that's what food is anyway. This is conversation. So this thing about self-love and re-identifying who that child has been a big part of my journey, even as a chef. I was fortunate enough, or not unfortunate, I grew up in a situation where there was domestic violence. And so this wanting to cook was really important to me because it was a way to receive, I guess, sharing. I felt, when you work in a restaurant, you work in hospitality, it was this cycle of prepare the food, cook the food, serve the food, the bill's paid, you get paid at the end of the week. Like I saw the cycle. It's not like a lawyer where you could be chasing money for months and months and months working on the same case. Whereas this 24-hour turnaround, which I thought was really, really cool. So it fed me. It literally fed me emotionally, mentally, somewhat physically. Mm-hmm. Quite a demanding job. But then, I've spent 30 years in the industry. It's, 31 years this year. And it's been, I worked in restaurants, high profile restaurants. I've navigated my way through television and cookbooks and radio. And now I do a lot more work based on non-for-profit. I guess, obviously stuff like, Get Hungry and Chef Cycle. I do work here in Australia and help or lend my name to the guys at Dementia Australia or the Red Kite Foundation, I get more out of giving my time to charity. And it's not always about giving money. Sometimes it's spreading knowledge. Sometimes it's just engaging and helping people who can't help themselves, sort of thing, which is really important to me. But fundamentally, it does all come back to that conversation at the table about how can I do better.
Yeah, no, we first off love all this, and thank you for being so vulnerable. We go into all the deep things on this podcast, so everything is welcomed here. And how do you think that you shifted from like being focused on money to actually serving and wanting to give more to other people and wanting to help those that have struggled with similar things that you've been through, like the domestic violence and things like that?
Yep. I've always, and it's funny, I just had a conversation literally 10 minutes ago on the same thing. Something happened along the way for me. I've always been drawn to teaching, and obviously on a child level, on an adult level, on a grandparent, it's the give and receive. It's why I believe in, got to be careful not to cast your net too far. When you leave a community of old people and young people, got to remember the older people give wisdom to young people keep old people young. And that's not to be ageist, that's just how I see the world. And so now I live in a community, and during COVID in the last year and a half, 2 years, I have a community of children who knock on my window when they want to try some new food, because I'm that guy who will it sounds creepy, but I hand food out the window. These kids, will knock on my window and they want to partake in anything that I have going on. I feel it's my responsibility to teach these kids everything I know. Once upon a time, I worked in an industry where recipes were secrets. You didn't share those recipes. You were lucky if you shared those secrets with your own staff, because that's my integrity. That's my livelihood. That's my restaurant. That's what makes me me. But as soon as you let go of that ego, let go of the secrets, remove the knowledge, share the knowledge, create space for new knowledge, I believe that's what kindness is. I believe that's what it is to be a real human. And so I feel like there are these human qualities that have risen to the surface during COVID, and the need to want to teach these children everything I know. And sure, they may not go out and make, a compound butter with 25 different ingredients in it, or they may not go and butcher an animal and make sausages or what have you. But what I can teach them is what I know. And I don't think it's important what I learned as a classical French chef, apart from utilizing every part of the plant or the animal, or only take what you need. This idea of regenerative farming is really important, and something that's only come to light for me as well. But these are the conversations I'm having on a daily level. So yes, food is important, but as is conversing about, and I know you do this too, is talk about the tougher topics.
Yeah, and it's a beautiful gift that you can give that back, and it's so fulfilling when you share that with someone else and you see them receive it, and and it just helps to bring all this awareness at such a young age. And so I'm so proud of you for doing that. And let's talk about your chef cycle. That's what it's called, right?
Yeah. So Lexi, probably about 2013, 2014, I was working on The Chew. I was one of the correspondents on the show, The Chew, for ABC America. And I was getting invites to here, there, and everywhere. And so my agent at the time, he took me along to an event for No Kid Hungry, which is obviously part of Share Our Strength. And they had a guest speaker. Guest speaker was Jeff Bridges, an incredible actor, someone who I admired. But I thought, I'll go along to that. But a celebrity, I like that. I'm going to go see him in person. I don't care what he's talking about. But anyway, I went along. I heard about and realizing that 1 in 5 kids turned up to school to having a school breakfast, understanding the cycle that if you don't get breakfast, how you're meant to, maintain concentration, how do you get through a year of school. The problem is children leaving school at the age of 15 and 16, having children, and then you're breeding the same cycle. And they correlate it to not having breakfast, to not having a meal. When a parent has to go, well, do we pay the gas bill or the electricity bill before they even put food on the table? And hence why there is this vicious cycle of poor education, domestic violence is on the increase, people not having the right tools to get through life. Basic fundamentals that we all deserve and all need. And no child should ever have to choose between the quantity nor quality of food. So it's something that I've become very passionate about in a very brief conversation. I put my hand up. There was a Q&A. I put my hand up at this meeting for No Kid Hungry, and I asked a question. So, well, I guess I put it out there. Look, I understand if I give a man a fish, he will eat for a day, but if I teach a man to fish, he'll eat for a lifetime. And Jeff Bridges answered that and said, well, look, we're implementing school garden programs to teach kids the importance of, tilling the soil, planting things, watching it grow. It's a process. It's not like, we go to the supermarket, we buy things automatically. There's an exchange and it's like that. But when you plant something and you learn to nurture something, there's more of a conscious, mindful set attached to that, and you become less wasteful. You just tap into what Mother Nature has already created for us. So I was won over, and then I went and did a couple of dinners to raise money with other, big name celebrity chefs in the States. We raised some money, and I thought, but there's more to this. I know I can raise more money. And at the time I was cycling like crazy. I lived in New York for about 4 years, but I was cycling. I thought, I'm going to ride across America. People are going to throw money at some Aussie to ride across America to raise money for hungry kids. But unbeknownst to me, people don't throw money at you when you decide to do charity. You not only do you have to do the work, you actually have to do the work. So we had to raise the money, but I had a conversation with Debbie Shaw, one of the co-founders of No Kid Hungry. Her and her brother, Billy Shaw, are the founders. And I had a conversation. I said, hey, look, I've got this great idea. And Deb said, look, we have a little bit of a budget to put into raising new ideas and plans for this charity. And so we came up with the initial route of riding from New York to Washington, D.C. So 300 miles. We did it over 3 days. I just had to get a small crew of people together. I think we got like 10, 12 riders and raised a little bit of money. We raised 25,000 in, we're like a 3-month lead up. We did the ride, did some press for it, a little bit of social media. And then we sat and talked about it after we'd done that. It's like, well, this has room to grow. We know a few people. Then ultimately, we've had to date, 400 or 500 chefs over a number of years. Obviously, COVID has put a restriction on everything and everyone and the way we raise money. But, over that period of time, we've raised close to $9 million. And for every dollar that we've raised, we connect a child to 10 meals, obviously very subsidized. But an important conversation to have, and I'd already said this, no child should have to choose between the quality or quantity of food. Like that's every child's given right is to have food. Mm-hmm. So Chef Cycle has become an arm of raising awareness and funds for No Kid Hungry, but ultimately something I'm very, very proud of. Thankfully, there is a big team in place that looks after running of that. I get to live my pottery and food life here in Australia, but I'm still tapped into that community, and I'm grateful for the relationships that I've built in the last 8 years.
So beautiful to give back so much. It's like every time you like glow up or you gain success, you just want to give it right back into the community.
It's not always the case though, Lexi. It's not always the case. I feel like, for me personally, for anyone listening, and it's like, oh, why does he do that? Or where was it in him to do that? I think there's a certain amount of empathy that you have. And I know that we digressed to talking about domestic violence, and look, maybe a chat for another time, but I will tell you this, there is a certain amount of empathy here. And when maybe you don't have all the tools to deal with life, and in my industry, cooking, drugs and alcohol are very prevalent. Fortunately, was something that I bypassed. I didn't drink alcohol till I was 30, didn't touch drugs, but I lent into all those issues in life, like relationships. With a relationship breakup, I didn't drink to avoid it. I lent into it. I cried. I shared my story with friends. I dealt with it. I felt the pain for longer. But ultimately, I've ended up with the right tools. I didn't have to avoid everything. I think that's the important conversation you need to have with yourself is, how am I building personal tools? How am I not avoiding? Don't run, but face things. It's like anything. If you owe someone some money and they're calling you and you avoid the call, well, ultimately, you're the one who's not sleeping at night because of avoidance. But if you just say, hey, look, I have a plan, we can deal with this. I can pay you a bit here and there. At least you create a plan. But if you avoid it, then that's when anxiety creeps in, and then you lose sleep, and there's the vicious cycle there. So I feel like for me, it's that I've always dealt with life, and I've taken on the bigger projects, and I've had my opportunities where I've raised money. I've also, my life outside of restaurant, when you don't have full-time work and you work doing TV shows and you're writing books, like it is like this. It's very, very, it's a roller coaster. But if you live beyond your means, you're buying cars and houses and all the rubbish that goes with it, that means something to someone else and not you, and not a way of building your own personal sovereignty, then that will destroy you. But if you have your ups and downs, and on some of those downs, you realize the importance of having just a home over your head and living simply, lowering your own personal expectations, not living up to other people's expectations, not being a people pleaser, you can live quite a humble life. And then at that point, that's when you realize, I believe we're actually here to serve. I think my role as a human is to teach what I know and to share my knowledge and help others. That's when you start living. That's when it becomes fulfilling. That's when you don't need a lot of stuff.
Yeah.
That's important.
I agree completely. It's so good to serve, and you're right, it's always so important to go inward and to face your own demons and your own problems. And when anything you heal in yourself, you help heal in others, because you can give that gift. So the more inner work you do, the better. And what are some things that you learned about yourself during this quarantine?
I think during this quarantine, we're back in our, I think, second lockdown now. Like, we've been in it for another month. But look, it's not so bad. We can still go to the store. We can go within a certain radius. I have my sovereignty. I have control over my own personal feelings. Like, anxiety doesn't run high, but I've lowered, and not to say I've lowered the expectations of myself, but I've removed the people pleasing. I've created purpose each morning by waking up and knowing that your voice can be quite powerful if you're acknowledging your neighbors, you're acknowledging your community, your village, and you're sharing with that. Everything else will fall into place. If for some reason I didn't have enough money to pay my rent or whatever it is, it's not going to happen. It might, I don't know. But what it is I know that I'm an important, I hope this doesn't sound egotistical, I'm an important fixture in my community. My community won't let me go. In fact, I think I've increased the real estate in my street by 25%. They won't let me go. But but the point being is, you tap into your community and you realize before you know, oh my God, I need something painted or I need something fixed. All these people live on my street. They need something cooked. They reach out to me. You start, but how many, for anyone who's listening to this, and maybe even yourself, do you know the people who live on your street? Do you know them all? Do you know all their kids' names? You should, because that's a safety net. That's important. So all the kids will come and knock on my window, and I know them all by name. I know all their names more than I know their parents' names, because they engage. They look at me without expectation, and they're happy for any information. And I think because of the modern world we live in, the phones that we sit on and pacify ourselves because we don't know how to communicate, we're avoiding a real conversation. The children are starved for conversation. That's why we've tapped into that. That's what's important to me. So COVID has taught me the importance and the power of the voice, but more importantly, to listen to others and what they need, and to serve where I can.
Yep. I think I was just talking to a friend about this, how communication, like, we have technology, which is so beautiful and so expansive and good in so many ways, but it's also really disconnected us and kind of dumbed down some of our social skills and our communication skills. And I'm finding a lot of times, like, people are struggling to have those hard conversations, or to be honest and to talk about things. And definitely one of the goals of this platform. But I think it's great that you're doing that, and that you're using community, because community is one of my favorite things, and it's so important. And it's crazy how, like you said, people don't even know their neighbors, and we're not interacting with the people that we live closest to, which is like, why aren't we creating that environment? So I'm proud of you for doing that. And with your people pleasing, that's something that I feel like a lot of people have brought a lot of awareness to, and something, I'm a recovering people pleaser as well. And especially being someone that loves to give like you, how have you balanced that, and how do you do with receiving from others?
It's interesting, because that can still be quite, wow, that's interesting, because I feel some days I'm quite exhausted. I was doing an Instagram live. So I do this thing 5 days a week called G'day Neighbor. and the children are quite active, and they do come along in the afternoons, and they do have questions, and sometimes they're just so perfect. Their conversation is so perfect, and we get to see it from a child's mind. It's not unlike a Mr. Rogers, that the whole thing in the afternoon. I really love what these kids are to me. But an hour ago I was having a conversation about domestic violence with someone who had her own real life situation. She was being strangled, and I've got the kids smiling and knocking on the window. Hey, are you in there? Can we chat? And it's like, so sometimes it can be quite hard. I've created this space. Sometimes you've got to be able to shut off and have your own personal space. So I'm going to drop the curtain and shut the door. And I need to have that, like, part of these conversations that I'm having, like some of the deeper conversations I have generally on a Friday, they're healing for me as well, because I know I'm sharing personal experience. But there is a connection. I think for many years I've lived a three-dimensional life. My idea of love was having someone fill my jug, or obviously physical, but then someone to bring and fill your jug was important. But now, so having sovereignty and having independence is really important. And I think I've learned a lot through these conversations based around domestic violence, like for women not to have equal rights and equal pay. You go into a relationship where you have equality, and that way you do meet in the middle. I don't need someone to fix me. I don't need to be fixing someone else. I'm opening to loving and sharing and caring for that person. But if you come with we all have baggage, I get that. But there's a way of owning your own baggage and being able to share it. And that really is through the art of conversation. And your community is a great way to start that conversation. So I feel, for me, it's sort of being able to, I do need to honor my space. I do need to honor my own time. Pottery, I'm not the greatest at meditation and sitting still, but pottery is somewhere where there is flow between mind and hand, where I can let go of expectation. As soon as you have expectation, that's where the mistakes are made. But then the good thing about mistakes is I learn everything through a mistake. So there is this cycle. And then, so when I was talking about three-dimensional love and relationships, there's physicality and there's sex, and then there's problems. But when you think five-dimensional, you think about how you can have a complete relationship with yourself, but you can allow a connection via someone else, whether it be for a minute, a day, a year, a lifetime. That evolves and changes. But it really is about having a grasp on who you are first, and having outlets that make you feel good about yourself. Not needing to have someone in your life, but when you finally meet that person and you're sitting next to them and you still miss them, I think that can be really powerful.
Yeah, that codependency is so ingrained in our society, where we think like we are one and we must so I'm always like, and a lot of people are always caretaking other people's emotions. Like as soon as they're feeling something, we like feel this responsibility, and that comes from our childhood, from when our parents were emotionally uneven. Like we feel if we don't fix it, like it's our fault, and all these other things. Yep. I have an abandonment wound because my mom left. I have all these things too, and so like all we want to do is keep other people happy. And once we can realize that that's not our responsibility, and even holding space for people to feel whatever they're feeling without fixing them is like one of the most healing things you can do. And so
that's a hard one. That's a very hard one to do. Listening is actually, I would just back up a second. Things that I've learned, I've become a better listener. Good. That is serving me. I can tell you now. Wow, powerful to listen.
Well, and the reason that we struggle to listen is because what I'm realizing is when someone is sharing that, instead of allowing them to feel that, you have to sit with that discomfort with them. And if you can't sit with that discomfort in yourself, then you're not going to be able to hold space for them to feel it as well. So it's really a good practice of learning like your own emotions. And once again, like you've been saying this whole time, like when you're with yourself and nourishing yourself and going inward and doing that work, like you're allowing other people to do that as well.
Yeah. I just quickly, for anyone who's listening to this and doesn't quite understand, like, I've tried meditation. I sort of get what you mean. But when you have complete sovereignty and you don't need to be fixing someone, and you don't need fixing, sure, I've got some shit in my past, but you don't need to be in that space. Oh my God, your life opens up and you are just pure light and joy. And I can't believe it took me almost 48 years to reach this point in my life. But I tell you what, I'm so grateful for what's to come next.
Yeah, and it doesn't matter. Like age is such a weird thing, and time, it doesn't exist on different planes.
Yeah,
You know, like just in this
exactly.
world, like yes, we're in this, but
Yeah.
yeah, I think that it's okay if you can't meditate. Like meditation isn't the only way. Like you said, pottery, anything to get you just in the present moment. Like that's what meditation.
Creative.
Yeah, anything that you can, and everyone is creative. Like we all have our ways of being creative. And I sometimes think like, I used to think, oh, I'm not an artist, or oh, I'm not a chef, or whatever these things. But really we are. We're just not like, maybe, we've set up these expectations and that dims our creativity, but we all have ways to be creative.
Our hands are all different. We all have different hands. So I believe we've all been, even though we call them hands, they all look different when you look at their palms and stuff.
Mhm.
I believe we've all been given different challenges and opportunities.
Mhm. Yep, we definitely have. Everyone, and that's why like, there's all the different ways to frame it, but like your wounds are your wisdom, or
Yeah.
your your
Well,
pain is your purpose, all those different things. And I think that is so true.
yeah. My favorite about healing old wounds, it didn't happen to you, it happened for you.
Oh, that's a must. Yeah.
That's a good one.
But it's hard because when people are really in the thick of it's triggering for them to hear that, and to for them to own responsibility to change it, because it takes you realizing that it's your job to move forward from that, and to not
Yeah.
live in that victimhood, and to not live in that suffering.
Yeah, I know it sounds hard depending on what people's circumstances are, but sometimes I feel like people don't choose to be victims, but they allow the term victim to reign over them. We can rise above, but once again, you need to tap into your community. I don't know what people are going through. Everyone has a different road and a different purpose, but don't stay or don't play victim for too long, because you'll end up thinking that you are.
Yeah. I'm so proud of you for doing that for yourself and your community. So last thing, no food. So talk about what you do with your cooking right now.
Yep. So currently, I guess, obviously being locked down, I do a little bit of consultation. I guess fundamentally, I would consider myself a content creator. I work with different brands, but fortunately, I get to keep authentic and work with brands that I want to work with too, which is cool, because it's a big scope of working with stuff. But I get to stay in a creative space. So, as far as food, I'll go live at 5 o'clock, but ultimately I'm cooking food that I'm eating every afternoon. And I'll tap back into some of those things like banana bread and making sourdough and stuff like that. But ultimately I like to consider myself waste free. I like to utilize the whole plant. I live, the cauliflower greens or the broccoli greens, and how to use, using up the peels and stuff like that. Like the food I started out cooking as a classical trained French chef has evolved. Cut everything into a certain size and there'll be a certain amount of wastage. Now I don't waste anything. But more importantly, I love this conversation based around the table where we're sharing continuously knowledge. We share food. So food has become, it really is my table, and it draws people in. But I think as far as the food, I'm also very conscious of what we need to be eating now for a way of managing mental health. If you eat better, you will feel better. It's true. Absolutely true. If you eat poorly, you will feel poorly. So it's a conscious, I guess food for me is a conscious decision to want to look after myself and my community.
Mm-hmm. And what are some ways, pick one of those things that you can teach us how to use the whole plant or whole food, like you saed the peels, or like the whole cauliflower.
Okay, so a good example is, do you know what silver beet is?
Yeah.
Or shard. Like a lot of people would throw away the stems. And so, for example, if you separate the stems from the leaves, give the stems a good wash down near the roots, and give the leaves a good wash, depending on where they've been grown. But you can shred the stems, shred the tops, keep them separate in a heavy base pan over moderate heat. Add in, say, 2 to 3 tablespoons of good olive oil, 2 to 3 cloves of sliced garlic. Cook that. Add the stems along with about, say, a third of a cup of water. Put a lid on and allow them to steam for about 4 to 5 minutes before adding the rest of the silver beet, the tops or the shard, and then cook that up for another 3 or 4 minutes. Like, then you've used the stems. You could do the same thing with broccoli and broccoli greens, cauliflower, all the cauliflower leaves. You could do the same thing. Those stems just take a little bit longer to cook, but they're just as delicious and they taste exactly like the cauliflower. So I just think we become creatures of habit. We do what our parents showed us. And if I followed, the rules of my mother and cooked 5 vegetables in 1 pot of boiling water for 50 minutes, everything would taste like a potato. Hence why they invented ketchup and mustard. We would never evolve and we wouldn't be able to maintain the nutritional content that we need. So I think making yourself aware of and lowering the amount of food wastage is important, because ultimately it ends up in landfill. And that's not good for the environment either. We need to continually replenish ourselves and the planet.
Yeah, so much food waste. It's insane. But definitely that's like, if you aren't composting, and yeah, like you said, like learning, like just try, like Google will tell you anything nowadays. Like just look up the food you have and see how you can use it. Complete recipe. The other day I went to a farmer's market and the celery leaves were huge, and I was like, there's no way I'm throwing all these out, and I ended up making this really good pesto with them. But it's just, I was like, okay, I don't want to waste this. What do? Google. And found something.
Carrot tops are the same. I think for anyone who's listening, once again, if you worry about food wastage, but it's a good practice is to have just been manage and monitor your fridge. When you go out shopping, make a list of the things that you need, rather than go, oh gosh, do I need an onion or do I need avocado? And you get home and the other ones look a bit older and look a bit tired, so I'll throw those out because I've got new ones. 60% of a lot of fresh food and ingredients actually gets wasted because we don't manage, our refrigeration system. So make note of what's in your fridge. Write shopping lists is probably very important as well.
So simple, but it's so true. It's like, come on.
So true.
So true. Okay, thank you so much. Where can people find you? And if you're offering anything right now, how can they?
So look at the moment, like I give my knowledge for free. So I go live at 5 o'clock my time, Australian Eastern Standard Time, which is you're in California, so I think you're probably 5 or 6 hours ahead of me. But I go live most days, 5 days a week, Monday through to Friday. And we really, come for the food, but stay for the conversation. It's very powerful and a lot of fun. So at Chef Jason Roberts.
Thank you so much.
So much, Lexi. So nice to chat to you. Wishing you guys all the best.